Hello and welcome to Pennsylvania Crossfire. I'm Buddy Lesavoy, a local attorney, and I'll be your moderator today. Pennsylvania Crossfire is brought to you by this station and our sponsors to air important issues of the day. We're delighted to have with us today, on the left, Paul Saunders. He's a retired engineer and an activist in both objectivist philosophy as well as the Lehigh Valley Tea Party. Welcome back, Paul. And on our right, we've got Jack Iantuano. He is the CEO of Indicon Incorporated. That's an employee benefits consulting firm, and Jack's active in conservative politics. Welcome back, Jack.
Thank you, buddy.
Today we'll be discussing how elitist left arrogance cost them the election. I'd like to start with Paul and ask where you want to start.
Well, the most major piece of arrogance was the 2009-2010 Obamacare bill, which the Democrats rammed through the Congress without a single Republican vote. 3,000 pages of document. And in addition, they began to arrogantly lie that you could keep your doctor if you liked it, you could keep your plan if you liked it. More arrogance. And then finally, Nancy Pelosi went over the top with her statement that we have to pass the bill so that we can find out what's in it. Now, that kind of arrogance irritated the whole country and led to a disapproval for Obamacare that was always running in the 65% range. So that was just the beginning of it.
Yeah. Well, I'd agree with Paul, and it's funny how from day to day, you hear things from different people. And I remember a machinist, a gentleman I know that works at a friend of mine's company, very, very nice man. He commented to me, he goes, as that was happening, he said, I don't mind helping people, but now I feel like a fool. Because he knew he was sort of getting, the street parlance is, he felt like he was getting rolled. He knew better. He understood that they were lying. They maybe thought, I guess part of the definition of arrogance is, you think you could lie and get away with it, but people aren't that blind to the technique or what you're trying to do. They didn't have a way to respond. But frankly, I think the 2010 midterm election responded. Right?
It was. That was a big part of the response.
And then certainly the 2014 midterm election. So it was sort of like a foundation was built with the 2010 midterm getting the House of Representatives majority. Now, that didn't go anywhere because the Republicans were quite spineless. They said they needed the Senate. So the folks out in the hinterlands of America said, oh, okay, you need the Senate. 2014, you get the Senate. So that was block number 2. And like we're saying now with the current election that just occurred a few weeks back, the third block was laid of this foundation of reestablishing grown-ups that aren't hopefully going to be lying and arrogant. So that's my take.
Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg, though, isn't it?
Oh, that is. Yeah, the other things that were going on were they had an $800 billion stimulus bill that was passed through the Congress and rammed down Americans' throats without a single Republican vote. And then they brought up the Chris Dodd, Barney Frank bill, which crippled the banks. And that one passed without a single Republican vote in the House and with only 2 Rhino Republicans voting for it in the Senate. And that has had a devastating effect on mortgage companies, banks, financial lending companies. Jack, I don't know if it's had any negative effects on you.
Oh, it has a ripple right through the investment world and insurance world, even though it's more directed towards the transactional side of things, yeah.
So you've seen the effects, too.
Oh, yeah.
You've got quite a hit list, don't you, Paul?
No, it goes on and on. Yes, it's endless. And that was what that resulted in was the landslide victory for Trump in 2016. That Jack mentioned, the 2012, the 2014, and now finally the 2016 was the final straw, breaking the camel's back.
Yeah.
And which I think shocked the other side. I don't think they were, all the media and all of their pundits were aligned, stating this fantasy world that they lived in, that they were going to win the election.
Yeah. The interesting thing about the list you have, and like Buddy mentioned, your list is longer and we can dwell on those specifics. And the arrogance behind it, there was an ideology of that arrogance. It was the ideology, and we've spoken about it before, of a creation of something, a utopia. You know, if we can just gain control and force this down everyone's throat, we will have a result that is more perfect. But it is so. I like to look at that rather than the arrogance of the act itself, but the arrogance of the philosophy and ideology of the purpose of having top-down control. Because I think that is the moral flaw in the actual uprising of the change in command. You know, that people were saying, you know, you're telling me what I see with my eyes and hear with my ears is not true. So they basically were trying to change, you know, like a fantasy world you referred to.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was true back in 1964 when Johnson pushed through his Great Society, costing us billions of dollars. And when you look at the projections of what that was going to cost, what Medicare was going to cost, what Medicaid was projected, it was projected out for 10 years. And when 10 years actually arrived, there was something like tenfold increase in the actual spending that was going on for those programs versus what the salesmen of those programs were selling back in 1964. More arrogance and more lies. So as you say, this is a long-term fantasy world which has just exploded in their faces.
Yeah, back at a time in the 60s when $1 billion was real money.
Yeah. So the other arrogance that was going on was with the administration itself. You had two thugs, Black Panther thugs, with clubs intimidating voters at a voting place, which is, I believe, a felony offense. And Eric Holder and the Obama administration refused to prosecute those people for the crimes they were committing. And that was, again, more of the arrogance and lawlessness. And part of that arrogance and lawlessness permeated the whole Obama 8 years in office.
That occurred in Philadelphia.
That was in Philadelphia in the 2008 election. So that was more of that going on.
But it didn't stop them from going after police departments trying to defend themselves. And
right.
Yeah, that's a good point, buddy. We're going to now go in and study all your procedures, and you know, we're going to make you the way we want you to be rather than leave that at local control, and those are dangerous precedents.
And they just recently edicted the Denver Police Department to hire non-American citizens onto the police force. Can you imagine anything as insane as that?
Now, that is from the Justice Department?
Oh, I'll have to check. That could have been another one of the Obama administration
executive
lackeys.
orders?
No, it wasn't. It was one of the departments. It may have been DOJ, or it may have been another one, as Jack said.
And why would they point out, if I could ask a question, just on Denver and not just say everybody?
Oh, that's just the starting point.
Okay, let's try to get a foothold.
They're the first ones to implement.
They're the first ones.
Okay, interesting. Well, on that note, let's take a break so we can hear from our sponsors that make this show possible. Please stay tuned. We're coming right back. Welcome back to Pennsylvania Crossfire. Today we're discussing the elitist left arrogance and how it cost them the election. Paul, you've brought with you a healthy laundry list. Why don't you keep going?
Absolutely. As you know, I'm a member of the Tea Party and was on nationwide conference phone calls in the 2012 election, prior to the 2012 election in 2011, with groups, Tea Party groups all across the country. A major one is True the Vote down in Texas, run by Catherine Engelbrecht. And what these thugs in the Obama administration had done was attacked every one of these Tea Parties who were applying for 501c4 status. They sent the IRS after them. That was the Lois Lerner controversy and scandal. But they also sent OSHA in to harass Catherine Engelbrecht. They sent the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to harass Catherine Engelbrecht. They sent the FBI agents in to harass Catherine Engelbrecht. And they were demanding, the IRS was demanding, that we take screenshots of every screen on our websites and send it to the IRS. That we take every document we ever issued and send it in to the IRS. That is a totalitarian state arrogance and tyranny, really, that was just unbelievable at the time. And it was happening from Maine to Hawaii. We had people on those calls from Maine to Hawaii talking about what the IRS was doing to them in their particular region. So it was not an isolated 2 agents, as Lois Lerner asserted, in the Cincinnati office that was launching this. This was a nationwide campaign by the thugs, I call them, of the Obama administration.
As thorough an abuse of power as you can imagine.
Yeah, my concern, and I had the concern back then, and I hope it changes now, is the Congress did not act. I mean, they had photo op hearings with the IRS, and nothing came of it. And that was, I think, a very instrumental part of the current election outcome, that the folks in America said this crime is going on, and we have a way, or doesn't the Congress have a way? And certainly in my view the Congress did have a way. They just didn't have the will or courage, moxie, to stand up to a federal executive branch or an agency like the IRS. And now we're at a precipice, in my view, because if we have all 3 branches of government and we can't stop them, there's not many options left. So, pointing those things out, I think, was the inherent building up of momentum, of the frustration of, are we a law-abiding country living by laws, or are we not, as you alluded to, as thuggery and tyranny?
Yeah, I had been aware, by the way, of the IRS, allegations, but I had not heard about the other agency.
Oh, being involved. And,
yes.
Catherine Engelbrecht testified to that before Congress. And again, as Jack pointed out, what did they do about it? There should have been a smackdown of every one of those agencies for carrying out these criminal orders to go in and harass True the Vote. It was really a shame. And when then the Congress subpoenaed Lois Lerner's computer equipment and all of the files and emails, and suddenly her computer was completely obliterated. You remember that?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
The computer was smashed. It was sent in to somebody, had a defect, and we crushed the hard drive, and everything was gone. And that then later happened, wasn't it, with Hillary's devices, right? Mm-hmm. So again, these people think that they're under subpoena. To obstruct justice while under subpoena is a criminal offense. And nothing happened.
They're ramping up the obstruction as they're under subpoena, right?
Yeah.
Now, from a legal standpoint, I mean, that obviously for the common folk, you would be in contempt. What would occur from that?
Well, typically, counsel would advise any and all parties to preserve everything they have. It's a litigation, strategy that you must advise and warn your clients and assist in preservation, not the opposite. So clearly, some questionable activity.
Yeah.
No doubt, Hillary and Lerner shared tech support with. Common incompetence.
Now, I must say, we're kind of blending some of the topics and time frames and issues, but I believe the part of this is the disparity that people witnessed of the double standard. I always feel the term double standard is too light in that situation. Like your kids accuse you of a double standard. You treat one child this way, there's a favorite or whatever. But when you're talking about living in a constitutional republic, you don't have that if you have this disparity between the people on the inside doing one thing and getting away with egregious crime.
Right.
And somebody that, steals a loaf of bread has a longer sentence, justice is served, and they pay the price. And I think what was happening, and sadly this was happening, the American public were saying, well, if they can do it, why should I do anything that's lawful?
Yeah, what law do I get to break?
What do I get to break?
Arrogance. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing is, as Jack brought up earlier, is this culture change where you had Barack Obama inviting his race-baiting friends in, Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, to the White House, and then making these outrageous claims like the Cambridge police acted stupidly, like Trayvon Martin could be my son, making him innocent, whether he's innocent or guilty. And then going along with the rioting and violence out in Ferguson when a proven thug and felon, Michael Brown, gets shot trying to take a policeman's gun away. And then they just went out to investigate. They sent the DOJ in to investigate the Ferguson Police Department. That attack on the people, the men and women in blue who keep the civilized order of this nation, to launch an all-out attack against them is a cultural attack on law and order in this country. And that's just shocking to me and very disappointing.
One of the things that I noted myself, and I had many people mention to me during the events, as you said, is whenever I heard local law enforcement people, particularly I remember very strikingly when there was the terrorist attack in Dallas, the gentleman.
Ambush police.
Ambush. It was quite a few police officers. I remember.
2 or 3.
Yes. And the response and capabilities and maturity and professionalism of the Dallas administration of law, all through the chain of command, how they described what they were doing, they responded to the public. And that happened in many communities around the country. You would hear local people and you said, wow, this is what the United States of America, the ideology of our country, can produce. Left people to manage their own affairs. And then, like you say, you had the complete counter of that when the Obama administration, Justice Department, FBI, or whatever have you, IRS, gets involved and then puts a spin on things that's totally outside of reality.
On that note, let's take a break so we can hear from our sponsors that make the show possible. Please stay tuned. We'll be back in a hurry. Welcome back to Pennsylvania Crossfire. Today we're discussing how arrogance on the left cost them the election. Paul, continuing down your parade of hot topics.
Well, the next agency that was involved in a lot of this arrogance was the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, which during the Obama administration pushed through a number of standards that were not scientifically justified. As a matter of fact, there was a man working there, John Beale, who went to prison for other kinds of governmental fraud, stealing money. But what he also did while he was in the EPA, and this is well documented, is he pushed through a new particulate matter standard that pushes it down to 2.5 micron particle size as the limit, for particle emissions and so on. that standard was enormously penalizing corporations and industries, and there was no scientific data to justify that standard being pushed through. And also then in 2015, the EPA pushed through and imposed a reduction in the ground level ozone standard down from 75 parts per billion to 70 parts per billion. And there were even fanatics inside the agency pushing for them to arbitrarily impose a 60 parts per billion limit. And just to show you how ridiculous that is, the 70 part per billion one that they did impose causes 60% of the counties in the United States of America to be in non-attainment. In other words, they're violating that standard. Well, what's the impact on the average guy on the street from this? What the counties have to do when that happens, when they're not in non-attainment, is they have to go to Jack and they say, shut down your business. They come to you and they say, shut down your business. They go to a power plant and they say, shut down that power plant. And that now kills businesses, kills the jobs that go along with those businesses. This is an extraordinarily dangerous thing to be doing with absolutely no cost-benefit analysis on what this impact is going to be in the society. And it's working on a premise that the environment is the supreme primary value in the culture, and that man and human flourishing is meaningless. And yet if you go back in history, why were we formed as a nation? Because of Enlightenment values. What were the Enlightenment values? Human flourishing and applying science to the betterment of man. That's what the Enlightenment was all about. That's what the Industrial Revolution was all about. And there was this enormous explosion of prosperity and everything else as a result of that. And now these people are saying, to hell with man, we're going to make this environment supreme and man can die.
With that 70 parts per billion or something like that.
Right.
Where were things before that? Was it tolerable with the EPA? Let's go back.
Yeah. Well, if you go back to 2008,
okay,
it was 75 parts per billion. And if you go back to 1997, it was 80 parts per billion.
Okay. And nobody was at that non-attainment?
People were at that non-attainment, yes.
Okay, so
companies were harmed and people were losing jobs as they ratcheted that number down.
Okay. Okay.
So
yeah, and then still back then. So this predate. Let's say if we went back to 2000, where were things back then?
That would have been under the 80 parts per billion standard.
Okay, and that was not unattainable or non-attainable.
There were non-attainment counties in that time too.
Okay.
But I don't have the figures on those particular particular time frames.
Well, it seems like it's gotten more ridiculous. Admittedly, you're the only engineer at the table, so the parts per billion, you understand that completely. It's a little harder for us to grasp, maybe, but it also transcended some of those technicalities to the ultimate in ridiculousness, because now I can't get a light bulb that fits my fixtures at home, and and the restrictions go on and on and on around my bathrooms and otherwise.
Yeah, and just to be more totally balanced about this, those restrictions on the light bulbs were even going on under the Bush administration. So the environmentalists have conned the culture, if you will, into accepting all of this totalitarian state imposition. Well, we're going to tell you what light bulbs you can use because we want to save electricity. We're going to tell you what shower head you can shower with because we want to save water. And they've just totally erased the human flourishing aspect and imposed this no impact on nature doctrine that they have, and totally subverted, if you will, the Enlightenment values that were the basis of this nation.
We only have a minute or two left. How about some other final topics and thoughts?
Well, how about the bogus war on coal? Obama and his environmentalist groups around the country launched a war on coal, and they did it in a strange time, coincidentally, because once we put in fracking, hydraulic fracturing with horizontal fracturing down under the 2 miles under the earth, we ended up getting huge amounts of natural gas released. The nation's actually sitting on an ocean of natural gas. And when they went on that war on coal, power plants were already switching over to natural gas because it was much more economical. And coincidentally, it reduced the amount of CO2 emitted, although the amount of CO2 has no impact, minuscule impact on the actual global temperature of the Earth. We've had 19 years going on 20 with no average increase in the global temperature, yet we've had a 15 to 20% increase in CO2. So their science's settled claim is utter nonsense. And real scientists across the world recognize that that's true. But you still have 10 and 15,000 people being flown off to Bora Bora and everywhere else to go to climate conferences.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Jack, and thank you, Paul, and especially thank our viewers at home for watching. Please be sure to tune in next week for another great edition of Pennsylvania Crossfire. This is Buddy Lesevoy for Pennsylvania Crossfire, hoping you have a great week.